So here we are now on the third and possibly the most complicated of the three pillars of object-oriented programming. This one is polymorphism. It's an interesting name. Polymorphism means one name, many forms. And it gets that name deservedly so, because you're going to see it take that shape in a lot of different ways when you see how this is described. So there's three types of polymorphism: overloading, overriding, and dynamic/late binding, or static/early binding. So these last two, we're going to take a separate module to describe them because they're fairly complicated to understand. Overloading, you've already seen this. You've seen overloaded constructors. So overloading is essentially an overloaded subprogram is a subprogram that has the same name but either a different number or a different set of parameters. So for example, when we have an overloaded constructor, we have our default constructor, which has no parameters, and then we have our overloaded constructor, which has a set of parameters. So that's an overloaded function. You've also seen other examples of this, things like messagebox.show. The show is definitely overridden a number of different ways. You'll see some have a basic one parameter set where you just specify the message that you're going to display. Some ask for the text in the message box as the title bar, which button you want to display. There's actually quite a few different options. So each one of these options is actually a separately implemented subprogram of the same name, show. So I have an example here which will actually demonstrate this. As you're going through this lesson, make sure you're trying to fill out this document to help organize your thoughts and processes. This is available on the class Moodle, and it should help clear everything up. But anyways, back to where we were. So this is a basic program which has one parent class and one child class, as you can see here. This parent class is just named parent. It only has one attribute, which is a public value with the name, with the label name, and it only has one constructor, the default constructor, and it specifies the name to be the value Frank. We'll go into detail about what this means in a minute, but essentially it's a subprogram that will display the name in this user-friendly manner. But what I wanted to show you was this overloading down here. We see one subprogram, public void write stuff, and it has one parameter, string stuff, and it will just display that stuff in the console. However, right below here we have another subprogram also with the exact same name, write stuff, but it has a different set of parameters, two strings, stuff1 and stuff2. And you can see that its implementation is slightly different. It will show stuff1 and then it'll go to the new line and show stuff2. So we can see that they have the exact same name but just a different parameter set. This is overloading. The next one is overriding. Now this one is a little bit more interesting. So overriding is when we have a subprogram that is redefined in a subclass. So it has the basic functionality in a base class, but we can redefine it, essentially recode it in the subclass. So it's going to have the exact same signature. That means the same name, the same parameters, everything. But it's just going to have a different implementation in the subclass. So you might see this in some programs where, for example, like a draw subprogram. So let's say, for example, you have a drawing program like Paint, and you have the implementation for draw circle or draw rectangle and all that kind of stuff. They all just have one subprogram called draw, and that base class, which is maybe called shape or something like that, it will then have its draw code, which is generic. However, each class that inherits from the base class, like triangle, circle, whatever, they'll have their own implementation of that same draw function. So when a circle tries to draw, it will draw a circle. When a square tries to draw, it'll draw a square. A triangle tries to draw, it'll draw a triangle. Even though they're all named draw, they're all going to implement their code in a slightly different way. So let's take a quick look at an example of this. Here is the base class, the parent class. and you can see that it has a subprogram here called display name. This is using a new keyword that's called virtual. Virtual means that it will guarantee that it is going to be overridden in a subclass. Okay, it doesn't have to be, but by claiming that it is virtual, we are saying that the subclass can override it. Well, how does it override it? How does it know that it's overriding How does it know that it's overriding a subprogram from the base class? Well, to do that, we need to kind of link this virtual together with another subprogram inside the base class of the same name. This subclass. So down in the subclass here, we see here's the same name subprogram, but this time instead of virtual, we see this keyword override. Override says we're overriding the virtual version of this subprogram of the same name from the base class. And you notice that in here I've got some basic implementation called to the right line, and it says that I'm a child and my name is blah. Just for demonstration purposes, I've also called the base class version of the same subprogram. I don't have to, but this is just to show you that you can. So essentially, if you actually run this code, you're going to get the base version first, which would just demonstrate I am the parent and my name is, and it's going to show name. The child, it's going to show that, and then it's going to do its own implementation. I am the child and my name is name. Now we're not going to run this just yet because it's going to cause confusion if I do, because there's certain things that I haven't explained with how that name is actually going to be implemented. Because you can see the child class also has its own parameter, its own property with the variable name name, same as the parent class does. This may cause some confusion because they're both public, but we know that the child inherits from the parent. So that is overloading and overriding. The next piece of polymorphism is dynamic and late binding and static and early binding. These are quite a bit more complicated, so we're going to talk about this in their own separate module next.